Okay, my apologies for that. A bit late to start. Oh, I have two upset dogs today, so we'll see how this goes. Okay, see if we can keep an eye on them without doing barking all the time. Okay, that goes over there. Feels particularly bright today. Oh, I know why. Because I was playing around with the video stuff last night. I was trying to see if I could get a video arrangement set up. Not work the way I wanted it to. We should be live on YouTube as well. Wow, disorganized today. Not having a great start. Right. So yesterday I was working on the whole sorry. Timing's been off a bit today. Yesterday I was working on the whole publishing information from my application stack, publishing it to Kafka, consuming it will come later. But right now I'm working my way through these things to produce them to Kafka. So last night I did some extra work on the planning items piece, so I started that component, and it started to highlight some challenges with recent choices. That's probably not the best tool to use. Probably Kafka tool better. Sorry. Offset Explorer. Oh yeah, this might not be up and running. I had to restart my machine. Yeah. Let's start the broker. That's really all I need there. So we have, I'm going to create another topic in a second for the planning items. But last week I spent some time obviously getting the promotion of ticket to planning item in there. And when I wrote the tests for doing the planning item, so I made the changes. So if I go into application, planning application, planning items, commands, add planning item, right? I have this is where I create the planning item. When I actually do create, it publishes an event, new planning item created. So that's what I want to listen to, and that's what I want to react to initially. This one is actually going to be need 2 events, so I'm going to go into that in a minute. It's kind of the first one where I'm going to need to publish the planning item from multiple perspectives. The first one is the planning item was created, right? And what this does is it literally just goes and pulls the entity back out. If for whatever reason that's null, which it shouldn't be, but it could be, right? Throw an exception. Otherwise, publish. So we turn around and publish that object to Kafka. So that's great. So I went to write tests, and I didn't realize I'd done it, but I wrote the tests for this. So I've got the when it's not available, again, for whatever reason it's not available. No, that is. And then when it is, we're using that new object builder that we created last week to assign the object. I learned some valuable lessons in doing this piece. And we verify that it publishes, and these pass, right? So in theory, this would work. So I went to add in the pieces to actually make sure the publishing was there. So I go into app settings here. I'm going to create this new planning items topic in a second, like I said. We're going to capture that event. So when we go to publish, we'll do that. And then I realized that I'd put my tests in the internal application stuff. Because this knows about the actual application, right? Well, implicitly knows about the internal application. So, yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over here. And I'm going to move these in there. Refactor, adjust namespaces. Yep, that'll work. Right. Add that. Should be able to run these tests without doing anything else. We should be able to run these tests. Okay. Let's build it. Come on. Let's see. So everything passes still, right? But obviously, I actually created it in the wrong directory. So that works because of my internal application. So I did highlight the fact that, okay, I need to now go into my internal application because that same event is going to publish. That same thing should happen from within here as well, right? Because this internal piece is just kind of, this is an API. This is an API that will trigger the application piece, and it's only internal because there is a specific action here, right? This produce planning item from ticket. This is when it promotes, and eventually this part won't be replaced when I move this to a service bus, etc. When I get away from the HTTP API, this is the only part that will be actually replaced here. This will be consumed, or however I configure the subscriber to the service bus. So as long as I make sure that I am publishing the event, right? Planning item is associated with ticket, but I'm not verifying that I'm producing that event in this test. So I need to modify this test. Fact, planning item created event is, how do I turn this elsewhere? I need to make sure I'm consistent. Planning item created domain event is queued. Right. And again, what I'm checking here is, in this instance, I'm checking that my planning item, right, is Why doesn't that work? Expected title. Expected description. Yeah, that's right. Constant values expected. Oh, because it's read only. Okay. So I must have changed this. I must have done the style different. Yeah, I made them const there. I mean, it doesn't really make a difference what I do, but it's just more consistency. So I'm validating again that I'm publishing this. Okay. There we go. Funny, I'm great. So as long as I'm validating that the domain event is being published, then I can trust the fact that again, the downside to this way of doing things is there's things I can miss, right? I have to change the application configuration. You know, Nats. Hi, Mightico. Nats. Network address translation. Not sure. What do you mean? What you can't link. The link won't let you link in chat. Hello, by the way. Have a look. An alternative to Kafka, and I was wondering if you evaluated that. So honestly, no. Obviously, I mean, connective technology for adaptive edge and distributed systems. That might be the weirdest kind of, hey, here's an acronym, but it's not an acronym. Everything you need to know about the connective technology for adaptive CTAEDS. NATS. What is NATS? Have you used this? It's really great and lightweight to run. It supports pub/sub streaming, MQTT, and so on. So reverse the question: have you evaluated this against Kafka, or have you used this, or you use Kafka? And what would you say are the benefits? Jet stream. Yes, just stream data. That's why I got to Nats. So one of the things I do want to do, that's not that's not solid for me. There was a .NET library though, right? I'm pretty sure I saw that. Yeah, C#. But the examples are not in .NET. So one of the things I want to do, and I actually should move my drawing over at this point. So I don't know how long you've been in the stream, but one of the things I was talking about is this right now is a very weak component. It's an API component, but I don't want to piggyback on Kafka because I don't use Kafka in that way. So a different technology, I want to use a different technology for inter-service publishing over Kafka. Benefits much more flexibility for streams/consumers. Very easy to operate instead of Kafka. Lightweight Go binary. Supports a lot of messaging patterns, not just streaming. I don't even consider Kafka that difficult. I mean, I've gone through end service bus setup, so Kafka is a breeze by comparison. In basic Kafka pub sub. So in terms of, I think we've been through this before. I probably needed to make a better note. But one of the things I was saying there is, in terms of technology evaluation, there is a point at which I will have to replace this API, right? This is not a solid thing to do, having this API dependency between these two systems. I don't want to use Kafka because I don't want to blur the lines of how I'm using Kafka versus how I'm using other things. So I'm using Kafka very much as a publisher of data, so I can consume it. And in this instance, what I'm working towards is publishing these items out through Kafka, consuming them, and storing a read database, so I can put an API against read, so then I can start building UIs based off the data. But when it comes to inter-service messaging, etc., what I do need to know, because I do have instances where I want to say, hey, the ticket becomes a planning item, planning becomes a story. Story's not here right this second. So in terms of evaluating technology, that's definitely something I would want to consider, but it doesn't seem like it's so with Confluent, their .NET support is pretty solid. That's concerning. It's updated. NATS by example. NATS, you could use request reply patterns from NATS. NATS also supports multi-tenancy. Right, because right this second, one of the use cases I have is definitely this one describes it better. I've put an API in there temporarily because ultimately I had service bus written in here. So I've created an internal API. So when this needs to promote a ticket to a planning item, it indirectly invokes an HTTP request, which then there's an API set up on this side, which is internal facing only. And I don't like that idea because there's no resilience in that messaging. If this had some sort of, and again, a request response, a request reply rather, would be beneficial in that instance because the ticket could then receive a reply of the created planning item, right? And that would then allow it to record that reference without having extra messaging in place to do that. So that I'd be open to using. So mass transit was on my list of things to use. What does it use for underlying storage messaging? How do you configure the request reply? Let's see. That looks like that's going. I assume that they redid the library for .NET. Let's see. system text, diagnostics. They got rid of the need for text in that example. That's very different. Okay, let's have a look. Install NATs from NuGet. Connect to NATs server. This connection is disposable in advanced code. We should flush our buffers. Create a message event handle and subscribe to the target subject, which leverages a wildcard greet. When the user makes a request, the client populates a reply to the field and then listens to that. Okay. So this is a consumer. That's a publisher, essentially. But we'll wait for a reply. Interesting. It's not navigation. Remembered it. So how does it scale? So with Kafka, you've got a topic. A topic is scaled by partition. And then the topic is scaled by the throughput is scaled by brokers. Okay, so this was implemented in. That's confusing. They call it C# too. I assume they had some breaking changes, so they just created a new version. I need to find somewhere to store recommendations for technology. So, right, I'm not gonna go and replace Kafka for certain at this point, right? Because obviously I'm kind of invested in doing what I'm doing. This would definitely be something I would consider for that inter-service operation stuff. Because again, I don't like the idea of kind of bundling kind of a service bus behavior on top of Kafka and then using Kafka for multiple purposes, because then you end up with a confusing use cases. So and it blurs those lines. I kind of like the distinction. Here's the technology I'm going to use, and yeah. And we don't need to partition unless you have a very high workload. Yeah, partitioning is, yeah. I mean, even in the immediate, the short to medium term, even if I produce this platform, I don't expect my messaging would really consume very much. But it's one of the things that limits Kafka is you do have to kind of design either from the start to be scaled, or you have to build your software in such a way that it can recover from replacing a topic. Yeah, this is definitely something that would be interesting to tinker with. Then 250,000 messages per stream with pure messaging is multiple millions per second. Right. I mean, again, it depends on a lot of things, right? For my use cases here, what I'm doing is consuming and creating extra data, and then this system takes over. So, yeah, I would be able to deal with any amount of messaging in here. If I put an API in front of all this that was user consumable, so you had literally I created a backend for a planning system that you could then put any UI you wanted on. That might require, because then you could make a platform out of that. But so then the messaging becomes more important. Yeah. I'm trying to think about where I should keep a note that I'll remember that. I'm pretty sure we've talked about it before. I think now I remember, because you're not a first time chatter. We might have gone through it before. I just might have forgotten about that specific conversation. I'm just trying to think about where I want to. Let's put it in here for now. Yes. Yeah, I'll definitely take a look through it, because it is, again, like I said, it's something that I want to. I need to replace it soon, right? I can't leave, if I build out the application the way I want to build it out. I can't just leave those pieces in, and it's already. I mean, I started the stream highlighting the fact that it's already creating an issue for me. So ultimately, this planning internal is an API right now. This goes away. This internal application doesn't go away because it still consumes things, but then the consumer gets put in here rather than an API. And I need that resiliency so that I can bring systems up and take systems down without having to worry about those things. Okay, that's something I would definitely review. So let's go create that topic while I'm here. So liquid sky dot line items. Again, I'm not gonna struggle in development to consume messages through here. Let's go and let's start the stack. Need to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Yeah. Verify it publishes. The next couple are going to be a little harder. Because tickets and notes aren't functional. I'm pretty certain of that fact. This guy. Yeah, Smith. Okay. Oh, I can't do that. I'm not gonna have permissions to do that. Log out. Log in. Value. Okay. So we go to planning items. A new planning item. Should be able to paste that in there. And planning item number. Did you plan on this? Hopefully I get green. Yep, that's fine. And now hopefully I can go to Kafka. No. Oh, there you go. It did process. So there we go. There's our planning item. Planning item number 312321. Did you plan on this? Assigned user identifier is null, which is correct. This is where we've got to do the other part, right? So one of the things that when I first started using Kafka, I didn't really lean into is the whole multi-publisher concept. I kind of, again, I'm out. Good morning. Hope you're well. With all the examples I've found for Kafka, people talk about events. And, you know, what is an event? Mouse clicked? Tenant created? You know, they're normally past tense descriptions of things that have happened. Right? That's my understanding of what an event really represents. When it comes to my usage of Kafka, I don't kind of do that. I publish the object because it's there because of an event, not because it is representing the event itself, right? It's not saying mouse clicked, here's the coordinates. Oh, it could do, I suppose, if you're thinking about mouse clicked in that respect. And I'm kind of, again, I'm talking it out because this is, again, something I struggle with all the time. I'm still questioning to this day, am I using Kafka the way that Kafka should be used? And the fact that it doesn't feel difficult, the fact that it feels like I'm using it and it feels comfortable suggests that I'm not using it necessarily incorrectly. I just might not be using it the same way another person might. So I'm very much leaning into, hey, a thing happened, publish this information, right? So an internal event happens inside of a component of my system, planning, tickets, etc. Ticketing, I should call it ticketing, and I need to rename it. A thing happens and it says, hey, publish this object because everyone needs to know that there's a change, right? What changed is not relevant to that. And I'm not trying to overcomplicate the topics. I'm just publishing a stream of versions of objects, essentially. So in this instance, the planning item, which I just published, right? If I go and assign that to someone now, I need to publish a different event. However, I also lean into that when I create. So if I create and assign, I get two events, which makes a mess of Kafka. Well, it doesn't really make a mess of Kafka because it's going to get one message saying, hey, here you go, there's no assigned user, and now here's an assigned user, right? So I could infer the user was assigned. Yeah, I don't know. but I don't like using those things. In terms of Kafka, I do not like. I've seen people do different types of structure for Kafka. I've seen. So right now, what I do is I publish this, right, and I have an event source on it, right. So here's why it came about, right. That's all I care about. So I'm publishing the object essentially. There's just a few extra fields that are information about the event, right. So everything else here is the actual entity I'm talking about. And then here's some additional information as to why it happened and when it occurred, right. I have seen, because again, this is published to planning items topic, right. So I've seen, so if someone does planning items, I've seen event created data object. I mean, essentially, I'm tracking why I did it. So here I am from India. Hi, Raj. Is that okay if I refer to you as Raj? I don't want to mess up. How you doing? So so one of the recommendations from Kafka, by the way, is when you actually, so if this is a data object in a topic, one of the recommendations is if you send, so obviously this is a key, right? And in this instance, my key is my identifier, right? That's my coordinating identifier. If you do a delete, the recommendation is you send a null object, and that represents a delete. If you're doing it this way, you can't do it that way. You have to actually say, oh, what's the event deleted, right? And planning items created, planning items updated, etc. This becomes costly. Yes, you can scale it, but you end up with more topics. And if you actually put that into something like Confluent Cloud, that starts costing more. So again, I think the design for right now feels comfortable for me. This is familiar for me. Hey, Junicus, how you doing? Good morning. So I'm not saying that I'm using Kafka correctly. What I'm doing with Kafka feels correct right now. Mighty, if you've got more, if you've got some experience in that respect, I'd love to have the conversation. And you're more than welcome to join the Discord if you haven't already. You don't always align usernames on Twitch with usernames in Discord, so they don't always go hand in hand. But but if you have some experience in that way, I would love to have kind of an ongoing discussion about how you use messaging, how I'm using messaging, our differences in how we approach it. That would be definitely something I'd love to do. Because again, not a lot of people do this stuff. It's surprising, but not a lot of people that come into these streams do this sort of stuff. And if they do, they don't pass any opinions, which is I'm always open to. Is this a web development class? No, it's not a web development class. It's it's me streaming building an application right this second. I am building an agile management platform. I have spent many years working in software, and I have formed some opinions about what works and what doesn't as a developer. From requirements gathering to planning to preparation to story pointing, I've got a lot of different opinions on how things should be done, or how I think things could be done, and where the challenges lie. And one of the things that I care the most about is developer productivity. So most of my stream is dedicated to me sharing that journey. I love to grow. I love to learn. I love to try new things. You know, do also start web development class because I wanted to learn it. I'm not really a teacher. I don't feel. If you learn something from watching this stream, that's awesome. Right? I love that idea. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, I am going to start working on more UI-based stuff. We are going to go into client libraries. We do actually have an application. If you're just beginning, linked below in the cards on YouTube, there's a repository called Water Drink Water. And on Monday and Tuesday, I stream doing that. Except next Monday, that's a different stream. But regularly, I stream 2 days a week on Water Drink Water, and that is a project aimed at being beginner friendly. We're building an API, we're building a UI, and if you want to, you can fork that branch and use that as an experiment tool, so you've got some actual substance to work with. It's pretty easy to get started, and if you're playing with React or Angular or whatever, you can build your own UI on top of it. And we kind of do that on stream. That's not aimed at me. Again, that's not aimed at me teaching. That's aimed at me just helping try and provide something that other people who maybe aren't as experienced can join in on and discuss with, etc. So I would recommend checking that out. So the experience regarding NATs. In NATs, there would be different subjects for these types, and you can put all ordered in one stream. If you then want to consume events just for a certain user, entity, whatever, you can create a consumer that filters by a subject pattern. Regarding Kafka, I think you're on a good track with that pattern. I would say a little schema management is needed when you persist the message for a long period. Yeah, schema is something that, and again, that's where the I've seen people use Kafka as a message bus, right? When you start doing this, schema breaks. Like, I could use schema on this, but I couldn't easily on that. So then you end up with, what I want to avoid is this world. So right now, all these events live in this library, right? Ultimately, I want that built off of schema. I don't want that built and shared as a NuGet package, which I've seen too many times. But if I want to consume this in a different part of the system, right? This is shared because I own all these projects right now, right? If I build a new application based upon these events, I don't want to have to share a NuGet package of the schema. So I think leaning into Kafka schema is something I need to do. It's just, that's hard. But yeah. Oh, you are going to be difficult today, dog. So, Junicus, you asked, what are you going to do? What are you going to use to abstract the messages? Mass transit. Which messages? You mean? I think it's, yeah. You mean this one? Okay, I need to go back to, I need to test promoting a ticket. So I go and I find the ticket from yesterday, which I won't have. Tickets. The publish part, there's something with Kafka and C# that you can use directly and it looks nice. Or do you need something like mass transit to make publishing the message simpler? Oh, okay. So actually, that brings up a point. So right now, my Kafka components are in here. So every time I've gone near Kafka, I've pretty much created a library around interacting with the library, right? Because there's pieces I like to use and like to word, and I do like simplicity. Hey Apex, how you doing? So boy leads me to sorry, my the problem with having a giant light in your face when you're streaming is if you have any dirt on your glasses, it drives you insane. Okay, so Kafka. I'm not using mass transit with Kafka. And actually, sorry, my brain. Mighty Core was just sharing NATs before, so this is another library for distributed messaging, and this looks like this could be something useful in terms of that inter-process communication. So you see, okay, why didn't I click on that before? So I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out. There's just a point at which. Okay, here we go. Use technologies, and you kind of work with. Hi Jesse, how you doing? You work with what you know, right? Especially when you're working, right? When you're doing a job, you don't often get the chance to learn a lot as you go in terms of new technology because you're often working with what you have as a tool. When you get to a point of being able to control or influence that technology, you've got to make a decision as to, if the business is not going to train, right, and you want to adapt to a user technology because you do see some benefits, you're going to end up with what I ended up with, which is kind of your own interpretation. And what that creates is a problem because actually, I realize there's dark mode on the site. You end up with how you interpret how something should work. And sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. It is what it is. As long as it's working, I don't see any challenge with that, right? So, like Mighty said, my use of Kafka is not necessarily incorrect. But that diagram that I'm looking at here, right, just kind of gave me a bit of clarity that I was lacking in a way of thinking about something. So I was saying I didn't want to create planning items.created, planning items.updated, right? Welcome back, Mighty Core. I didn't want to create these things, right? Because I see them as consumed by I see them as individual topics that are consumed by consumers, right? So using this pattern isn't that necessarily damaging to me, because I can say, oh, that's planning items, and here's my object, right? And anything that needs to consume a planning item can consume a planning item. Doing it this way as well, I have I don't need to know created versus updated, etc. Right? Doing it this way, I can scale independently. So if I'm creating more than I'm updating, or I'm updating more than I'm creating, I can scale back on this and scale up on this, right? If I do it this way. But being that the messages look almost identical, they're just the source of why they came about and what does updated mean, right? I can kind of infer it from this. But that diagram kind of just gave me a moment of clarity into what I'm missing in using in Kafka. So I read about streams and event streams, etc., right? But people lack good samples of what they mean. They say events like orders completed, orders processed, orders received, right? What do those mean? And then I consider, well, hold on, if I wrap them up into a stream called orders, all the events come in, and I consume orders, I don't consume orders received, orders processed, or whatever, that starts to give me a little bit more clarity into what that exactly means in that design that I'm missing. So this gave me something to tinker with, something else to learn. So I probably will pick this up in terms of the inter-service communication. Right. But again, if you look at videos, if you look at samples, if you look at even talks on messaging, on Kafka, on whatever, they talk about events, but they don't even show. Very rarely does anyone say this is an event. And I think it is because of this problem of interpretation or understanding. And I don't think people necessarily want to be defining what an event really is. Or it takes you down a rabbit hole that makes it harder to explain. Maybe one day I'll do that and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's why people don't do it. Dota, good morning. Hope you're well. So that's interesting. How did I get that? Oh, Kafka. So I'm using Kafka. I use Kafka as an event publisher, and I inject an event publisher. Nice, 4-day weekend. I've seen this recently. The NAT stuff. Yeah, we'll do a play with it for certain, and see if I can get some. Coming back on my point of using technology, right? If you're picking this stuff up in a work environment and you're not given the chance to go off and train on it, but you know it can help you and you use its features, and you might not even tap into you might not tap into a small percentage of what's actually possible, but you're using it, and through more use you're going to get better at it. And I think one of the things I was kind of guarded against yesterday, and I don't feel that I need to be guided at this point, because I can make the argument for it, is what I'm building now, I don't have any customers for. I don't have a solid, here's a business that needs this, right? This is my feeling, this is my passion, right? So why am I building everything with Kafka and scaling out and building services, etc., right? I could build it really simple. But if I prove it out and I build it as one application, that's kind of what we went into yesterday, right? I go over here. If I build it out in this simple way, and then I find that I need to scale it, this is a lot harder to then go and pull apart, because, customers, right? So, giving myself the flexibility to use different technologies, giving myself the ability to swap out technologies, right? At one point, ticketing was based on Couchbase. I'm not. Couchbase is still coming back because I did enjoy using it. I just didn't enjoy setting it up, and I'd like to know more about that. But so document DBs are definitely not ruled out right now. Everything's relational DBs. This could even be document based, potentially. Yeah, is it using technologies? On this one, yeah, on my personal GitHub TBD develop there, that's where the screen is. My personal GitHub, there's a Kafka library, right? And it's basically these pieces with more substance on them. And not to on my YouTube channel, there is this Kafka extensions video, and that goes through how I use Kafka, how I use that library, how to pull it in, how to integrate with Kafka, the configuration, etc., or how it works. And so that's what that is, right? So when I get an event, the way that happens is, if I go to planning application, planning. So if I go to add planning item, this is what we're about to go into this next part here. I go to create, I publish a domain event, which is planning item created. That is then subscribed to here in subscribers planning item created. And I turn around and I publish that, right? Now this doesn't know what Kafka is, but it is an iEvent publisher. In that extensions library, I actually implemented Outbox, right? So, which I need to put into this. Because right now, if Kafka's unavailable, this will fail. And it's actually the fact that this is in an outbox of its own that would actually give it resiliency. But yeah, it kind of should hand it off to a different outbox, is the idea. So this notification outbox is internal notifications. Yeah. So if you go to GitHub, github.com tbd develop Kafka.extensions. Basically, configuration, you set up your consumer. Now, these are just regular Kafka configuration stuff. So rather than try and make any weird abstractions or objects, it's funny because at one point, Confluent actually tried to create an object to wrap this up and then backed it out and just went back to using their basic configuration values. And then for a topic, if you want to publish to it or subscribe to it, etc., you configure the topic with the type name. So this is the event that it's going to pull in from. And then the topic is going to actually match that event too, right? And then you kind of create a service and you can publish a message. Consuming, you can set up a consumer. You can add a dispatching consumer. So what this does is it actually creates a consumer thread. It creates a task, a thread per topic. So this is built to be built slightly differently, but ultimately, if you're just doing it from a development perspective, you can set it up this way and configure them. And then it creates this basic worker service which starts monitoring. And then the outbox again, you can add an outbox, and there's an in-memory outbox, but I think I created a SQL version. Outbox. No, I did not create a SQL. That's why this is not done. There's no SQL version for this one yet. Right. For my mediator extensions, and this might be overkill, right? Is it? Develop. Oh, mediator outbox. That's why I created it separately. So this is for mediator. This is to add an outbox pattern onto mediator. This does use SQL, right? So when an internal notification publishes, there is an outbox so that it can get processed, and even if it crashes, it will still be there afterwards. And then there's then I need to create the SQL version of the Kafka version. Right. That's probably why I haven't introduced it yet, because it doesn't actually have much value over what I've got, and also debugging and stuff. So this is the basic version of what I have. But ultimately, I inject an iEvent publisher, and with the outbots, I still inject an iEvent publisher. It just intercepts it with an outbots. Okay. Let's add publish applying item to Kafka when added. Oh, I need to test. That's what I need to test. I need to test a promotion. Tickets. Promoted. Need this one. Oh no, it's 1003. New planning item, promotion. What? Planning item. My dog is not calming down today. He's just solidly barking. Okay, so that's a ticket. That goes to planning, that posts to planning items. I had a promotion point in there. Oh no, here we go, promote ticket. Because that's planning items. That's me testing the promotion on the other side. So let's go back to here. I know this one's valid. Go back to tickets, promote ticket, bearer. And let's do 1003. Okay, so what that does, or what that should do, is I should get a planning item appearing here. Right? That'll be today. Yep, today. And I should have another Kafka message. Nope, I do not have a Kafka message. Why do I not have a Kafka message? I processed it, planning item created. Because there's no subscriber to it. There's a subscriber in here, but this is not this application, right? I need a, this is another reason why I do not want to have this lying around. Although this would always be the case. Ooh. Interesting challenge. This is one of those scenarios where if I could really kind of leave something just left out there. So what I did earlier on is I moved this around because the testing went with the planning the application because I have the subscriber in here. But it didn't matter that it was in this one, in the internal one, because the code is all the same. It's not because the subscriber, this does not take a dependency on application. So this does not have that subscriber. What should it do? So the benefit is I do know there's a difference, right? So I do know the difference between a planning item created from publishing, from actually being created, and a planning item being promoted. So what I need to do here is create subscribers. Actually, let's go back and let's reset that. So right now, that's the only indication I have that it's promoted, by the way. I think, coming back to Mighty's suggestion of using the NAT stuff, there's a request reply there. So in the instance of this particular piece, I could use that to say, hey, promote this ticket to a planning item and give me back the planning item identifier, so that this could actually store the relevant planning item identifier. So this system doesn't have. So this is promoted from ticket. This doesn't matter how many times I do it, because it won't know the difference. There's no dedupe. So now that can be promoted again, I can test once I get this working. So what I'm expecting to see here is, instead of planning item creating notification, I kind of want to say promoted from ticket. Because I know the difference in here, based on, even though it's the same notification. Because I don't have to put that there. I just kind of use that as a default. So let's create publish creation. So this is my standard, right? I'm going to create directory planning item created. So that aligns with the event. And then I have the action that I'm going to do. So again, breaking the system up into, okay, if I have things that need to happen in my system based upon that event, they each have a different class here, because they each have a different handler to do those different things. I believe that this mediator library that I'm using does not have the ability to run them in parallel, so I don't think I have any challenges there yet. I need a using planning item created notification equal notification equals planning item created. This is an I notification handler of planning item created notification. This takes a I repository of planning item and an I event publisher. Now, downside is this code is almost identical, right? Which doesn't mean that these tests, as much as I didn't want to have them duplicated, concerning planning item. So if you're just joining the stream, by the way, if you are new to the stream, don't be afraid to ask a question. Don't be afraid to pass an opinion, as long as it isn't, as long as it isn't you're doing that wrong. I hate the way that works, or ugh, horrible code, right? That's not productive. That's not constructive either, right? I can't learn from that, right? If you want to say that, that's fine, but that's a personal preference, right? So that I'm going to ignore. I know, right? There's plenty of that on Twitch, right? I think I say it in my chat rules as well. I reserve the right to ignore what you say. But again, this stream is not meant for me to just be productive coding, right? If you want to sit and watch me code, you're more than welcome to sit and watch me code, or have me as background noise. But if you do have opinions on what I'm doing, if you do feel that you know something that I'm missing, if you feel you can contribute, I think that's worth sharing. How about this? What is Kafka and why are you using it for this project? Okay, so Kafka is a messaging platform or an event streaming platform, depending on how you put it. Let's make sure that I don't want to misrepresent it, because again, we'll have our different understanding. Event streaming, right? This was originally created by a group of people in LinkedIn. It was created to distribute logs across many different systems from LinkedIn data, right? So it was built purely to distribute data across LinkedIn in massive quantities, billions of messages a day, right? Confluent is the company that those people that started building Kafka, they branched off, made Confluent, and this is the company that now maintains Kafka. It's Apache Kafka because it got put into the, so it is part of the Apache, what's that word? Foundation. But they maintain libraries and stuff around using Kafka. So what am I using it for in this project? So this diagram probably gives a bit of an explanation, right? So here's the design I'm aiming for right this second. I have chunks of this. So does it run its own server like Node, Astro? Does it run as Node.js? So Kafka's built on Java, and it runs, right now, it's Dockerized, right? These are the individual components of Kafka. They still need Zookeeper, but ultimately has brokers, right? And this is how Kafka scales, right? You can have many of these brokers to get speed through your messaging. Well, one of the ways Kafka scales. So this is a Docker container. I basically publish information into Kafka, and a message might look like this right now, where I have too big. In this instance, this is a planning item. I'm publishing, its public identifier, the identifier of the tenant it belongs to, information about it, etc., and then where it came from and when it occurred, right? So I'm publishing this information, and I'm using this to, when things happen in my systems, I publish the information. So tickets, notes, planning items. These three published. This one's the one I'm working on right now. These will publish shortly. And they can be consumed. And the way I'm doing this is when you create data, so if I create a ticket or I create a planning item, it publishes this information, and these consumers will pull it in and store it in one big normalized database, which I can then use to do view APIs off, right? So my read and write are completely separated into the application. Benefit is I don't have to go to different APIs for different pieces of data. This system then creates this read-only instance that I can pull and I can scale and I can work with independently. So for Kafka, my use of Kafka is all about data distribution quickly and efficiently. It is very robust. So yeah. And as Mighty Core, started the stream with, there's other options for this other stuff. So your main API is a router, it handles it in sub APIs, eventually writing to a single DB, and viewing the data is separate. Essentially, yeah. Yeah, so I will have an API gateway on here so that, from the client side, there'll be two touch points, right? There'll be a read and a write API. The API gateway will take all the APIs and route them effectively. And when I'm doing things like posts and puts and patches, they'll all come to this side. And when I'm doing gets, they'll all come from this. And again, it means that my data stores, they might be stored on the same server, but there'll be different databases in the same server, or there'll be different technologies entirely, right? I could create reporting servers off of this. I could do all sorts of other stuff using this exact same thing, and I can build that in the future. I don't have to worry about it now. It means that my write stores can be optimized purely for the writing of them, because the reading doesn't really. The reading will always be by primary key, because I'm going to pull that data straight out and publish it out, right? So my reading, I'm not going to be, go and get me all the things where the date is greater than this, right? That's never going to be a concern of these databases. These databases are only going to be insert, delete, or get by ID, because I'm going to need that one thing. So these can be optimized for that. And then this, where I might say, go and get me all tickets older than 6 months. This can be optimized and indexed for those read cases. I can build views and stuff, and I don't blur the lines between the data sets. So that's the approach I'm taking. Isotrack, welcome. What DB platform am I using right this second? This is pretty much all SQL Server. But again, I'm not. These are definitely SQL Server. This was using Couchbase, so I was using DocumentDB, and the only reason I'm not using DocumentDB for this right this second is that I had some difficulties in the setup, and I'd like to spend some more time making sure that's clean. But I wanted to make forward progress. This could just as well be a DocumentDB, and I can experiment with these different technologies at this layer from a read perspective. But I can play with GraphQL here. I can do all sorts of stuff on the read side by just keeping all this data separate, because I can just consume this data into different data stores and test it. Use Snowflake at work, but dang, it's expensive. Yes, Snowflake is expensive. Snowflake is fast. And from an analytics perspective, publishing, so think about this. These, as they produce data, publish the data up into Snowflake. And I've done that before. I actually have integrated Kafka with Snowflake connectors, so that this information is constantly updating into Snowflake DBs. Snowflake's quite fun to use, considering the data sets it can go over. So yeah, I could later on, if I decided I want some analytics, I could publish to Snowflake from here. But Snowflake could be a consumer in this layer just as much as everything else. So I don't have to worry about my application changing or Snowflake usage down the line. So I've kind of got a little guarded the last couple of days, because there's obviously the argument I could just do this, right? I could just make a nice quick layered architecture, build the application, and get something out there, whereas I could be seen as to be over engineering this. Exactly. And I know that I need this. I've done enough of this stuff over my career to know that if I was the product owner here, well, I am the product owner, right? But if I'm the leadership thinking about the future, this is what I'm asking for. The problem is that this is costly in terms of time, in terms of energy, in terms of effort, just pure effort. It's costly. So, but I've got the time. It's personal time, right? But I have developed using Kafka in a production environment, so I do know what it is to do it. So yeah. So this is almost identical code. Let's actually do this the right way first. Let's copy. Oh, let's do this the right way. Let's copy. Nothing good starts with let's copy. Refactor that. Adjust namespaces. Looks like a fun project to code. I use Kafka at work. I like it, but dislike it at the same time. Again, I think we might have different experiences of using it, right? To me, Kafka is a great tool for making sure that I can just say, hey, I now need to spool up a different system. Okay, let's spool up a different system, and it can start consuming the data, right? One of the things I'm going to have to do here is I'm going to have to create some layer of data export, right? Because if I bring something new on in Kafka, consuming the events or republishing all the events doesn't make sense. So I'm going to have to create some sort of data adapter or something that says, hey, I need all this data, hook in, pull it all out, right, and produce it in a form that can easily be inserted into another system, right? So some form of data export, data migration tools is going to be necessary to use it this way. And again, like I said to Mighty Core earlier on, right? I could be using Kafka in a very different way to how other people use it. I think it's very much the sort of technology that people pick up and use what they know. Once you've had a bit of time with it, you can improve things, but you can also end up with a misinterpretation of how it should be used. Again, oh, not Twitch. I do have my own kind of framework building around how to use Kafka, right? So how to deal with consumers and publishing and consumption and outbot stuff. So this project overall, by the way, is not open source. This is aimed at being a product. But things like this, the Kafka extensions, the mediator extensions, things like that I'm using, they are open sourced. They are published to NuGet. So they are freely available. I do need to come back and do the SQL outbots for the Kafka extensions. Whether I use that as an actual separate, I think I might create that as an actual separate project. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Why are you doing this to make money? You don't have to share this, so I'll just watch your vlogs to rip it off. Well, okay, so the reason I'm streaming it is because I think that real application development is not something that people get to see or get to appreciate the differences, right? So you might be a month into your journey as a developer. You might be 30 years into your journey as a developer, and you're coming on Twitch for very different reasons, right? I think we all have a different story, and I think we all have, that imposter syndrome is common amongst developers, right? It's often what gets in the way, and I think that one of the things I would like to say is that I'm a pragmatic developer. I believe in developing good code. I believe in developing correct code, but correct is correct for me. I can read, I can maintain, I can update, not what you believe is good code, right? So we might not agree on what is good code, but we will agree on there's a need for software, right? I totally agree. Seeing everything working the first time in a tutorial, never seeing them reading the dots, it's almost like influencers in social media. Yeah. Take care, Junicus. Have a good one. So me streaming this is purely to help show, hey, this is application development, right? Good or bad, right or wrong, I don't really mind. But I also want to learn. I want to grow. I want to improve. So, in the same way as here's my way of doing it. If you come into the stream and say, actually, did you know about this way of doing it, or did you know about this pattern? Have you looked at this? And we can go off and look at those things, and I can take it in and decide whether I understand it or I can comprehend it. I'm very much I'm at home in code. I'm not at home in concept. So talking about abstract concepts I never do well with, but if I look at code, I start reading code and writing code, I get more and more comfortable. So I think that is why I share. My last job, the best programmer there was brilliant, but no one could maintain his code at all. He was too abstract, so everyone dreaded any PRs for his code. I'll take readable and slightly wrong over everything being a Reddit. I think I wouldn't say I'm brilliant in any way, shape, or form, but I would say I do sometimes toe the line of a little bit too abstract. I try and optimize things. So some of my code might not be very friendly. But in general, what I try to make sure is the code is readable, maintainable, and that there's patterns in place that can be flexed if they need to be. So if there's more abstract pieces, if there's more advanced pieces, higher level developers or more experienced developers, let's go with more experienced, should be the ones looking at that, not necessarily junior developers. But junior developers could be brought along for the ride, and I think that's where pairing and things come into. If code is scary, that's never good. You'll never maintain it. First time I manually passed JSON was told, hey, there's a built-in function for that. I was like, oh, dang, that's useful. Or using a flatten function in Excel. Right. Sometimes you use what you know, and that's not a problem. But I've been doing software development now for 25 years. I've worked in different tooling. I've worked in different environments. I've built software, and I've spent a long time worrying about whether someone would consider my code right, and it stopped me from evolving. Right. So I'm going to write code the way I write code. If I bring anybody else onto my team, our code evolves to be the team's code, not to be my code alone. So if there's different practices, if there's different things that help that other person or those other people get more involved and they can now maintain the code easier, then that's good, positive change. So collaboration, and definitely, okay, I need them to go away because I need to not have, I don't want that one. Right, I want that one. This is slightly different. I need not that one. I need that one. So yeah, if you're joining the stream, I don't mind conversation. Conversation is healthy, as long as it's on this topic, right? On the topic of software development, improvement, growth, etc. Is very much important. Not that it won't divert from time to time on different topics. That's perfectly fine. If you're hanging out here and we're talking about stuff, that's fine. But in general, I kind of keep it focused. Okay, so what I've done there is I've copied the same test because they matter the same, right? What I should verify though is that when this publishes, I need x.event source should equal promoted from ticket. And that's not how. Let's do blah, blah, blah. Expected event source. There you go. The reason I don't, so I know it wants me to make that a const, but the reason I don't is because this is kind of silly. You can't make const GUIDs. Right? Just when I do that, I can't follow that pattern. So that's purely one of consistency. It's not going to make a difference. Const versus read only doesn't make a difference here, as long as I'm explicitly saying they're not going to change, right? It's not going to make a massive difference. If this starts multiple instances of this class for different facts, it would actually create new instances of these variables, so it is more memory intensive. From the readability perspective, it's not going to hurt. If I make them consts where they're necessary, they become static to the class, so it doesn't recreate them every time, right? Whereas read only, I'm going to get a new copy of this variable every single time I create an instance of this class. So if the facts run in parallel, and let's say I have 15 facts, I'm going to have 15 copies of these variables temporarily. Yeah. So it's not. I don't see that as a harmful thing necessarily. And again, it's just because I don't like mixing const and read only in there. It doesn't. This reads way easier for me. Again, personal preference, right? So if I run these tests, they should fail because they're going against this one, right? And these tests should pass because they're going against the original one. Yes. So now let's implement it. And we're going to implement it by copy and paste, pretty much. With one slight difference. We still need that. We still need that. And we need to reference our events project. And then here, we're going to do promoted from ticket. Now the title is going to contain that anyway, right? That's not going to hurt, but there we go. Okay, so now we have passing tests. Copying and pasting unit tests is often, it's not something I'd advise because if the use case changes slightly or there's a subtle difference, you can oftentimes miss them and get a false positive on a test. Just very careful. You should understand what you're copying and pasting, and you should make sure you review enough. In this case, these events, these things, are almost 100% identical other than this, right? However, I have added an extra piece here that I need to validate here, right? So I haven't validated that the source is correct. So private read-only string expected event source, name of, again, being consistent. If I redefine that class, this unit test will break with that hard-coded string, whereas they have the option to say planning item created, and that probably can't be. No, it is. Okay. X.event source equals that. There you go. So now let's validate that works. Interesting. So that is down to my choice of structure. I have subscribers, right? So so think of these as use cases. Planning items is a use case essentially right now, right? I could go on to the conversation of clean architecture and inconsistencies in developers for a long time, but we're not going to go there today. I have a subscribers folder underneath here to try and highlight the fact that these are notification subscribers. These are internal listeners to events happening in my independent domains, right? Then I have the event itself as a folder structure because the things that could happen on that event, I want to lay out this structure, right? So that if I have something else that needs to react to this, let's say I need to trigger something to change or to notify a user or to do something else after on that event, I don't want to bundle it into planning item created it event handler or something like that, right? I don't want to create one handler. I want to make that structure very clear. And then I'm being consistent in this. If I publish an integration object, publish integration off of that event, right? So I'm trying to be explicit. Here's how this is going to work. So any integration event built off my default integration event requires an event source. The default integration event also contains occurred on, right? So it captures date time it was actually created. But the problem here is because of this way of doing it, my namespace for this is also going to contain my. Actually, in this case, it's not. But now that name of that namespace, that's the right way. That namespace is the name of my event. So I created this using to abstract that, which in this case it doesn't hurt. In this case it does, because it's not going to work. Good. That's hard. That's obscure. So I've redefined this, right? And this is my namespace. Because this is just a name of, that isn't going to hurt, but it's that it's using, not that. But I want to do that because if I refactor things, this test should pass now. Yeah. I'm going to make the decision to move on from that now and let that bite me in the backside later. There's no way I'm going to put to do in there. There's no way I'm going to put. One of the things that you will not see me do a lot of is put comments in code, by the way. It's something I do not believe in. Thank you for the follow, Satrack. Appreciate it. And if you guys are interested, if you want to talk more about this stuff, if you have more questions on things like the Kafka stuff, there is a Discord. If you're interested in joining, you're more than welcome to. I'm happy to discuss this stuff all the time, even off stream. It's something I love doing. You like self-documenting code. I try to make my code readable. I try to be explicit. I don't have an issue with long variable names if they're descriptive. I don't have an issue with reviewing things like that and changing things like that. And again, I think the code base you are scared of is the code base you will not change. Not you can't change it, but if you're scared of the code base, like you mentioned before, the programmer that was, a little bit too abstract, people were scared of the PRs. You're scared to search that code because it's not necessarily it's too advanced. It's just it doesn't. You're scared of it because it just seems like you could break it, or it seems more fragile because maybe you just don't want to change it. So I like to write code in a way that I'm not afraid to pull the parts up. Well, simple comments can help you increase reading speed of things happening. I have no need for any simple comments. Really? I tend to disagree. If the code is written in a readable manner, comments rarely are necessary. I'm not saying they're never necessary, right? There is a point at which comments can be necessary, and there's some code that just, no matter what you do, it's not going to read correctly. My approach to that is the team should agree upon the comment, right? Well, there's a difference between documentation and comments. Documentation is a different thing entirely. If you're documenting an API for somebody else to consume, that's necessary because no one's just going to make it up as they go along, right? Now, a good API reads easily anyway, and you can kind of figure it out, which is actually how I do a lot of stuff anyway. But in general, I don't see the need in comments, in code comments. not documentation. Different things. But the devs working on your projects are also consuming your work. But again, that's why consistent patterns, readable code, single responsibility for things, making sure that you are not deviating from things, making sure you're discussing things ahead of time. If you've got a piece of business logic, making sure you agree upon the terms ahead of time so that you're talking about the right thing and using the right words to describe it, right? There are things that you can do, that you should do. That means that that code is written in a way that, okay, well, we need a handler, we need this, we need that. Okay, there you go. You shouldn't have to comment it if the code is consistently of a quality and a style. So that's kind of where comments get, again, and I'm not saying comments are never needed. I'm saying that I don't use comments, and you'll see it. I'm consistent. I don't write comments in there, but when I do need a comment, when there's something that I just cannot describe, I put a comment in. And the way I think of that is a discussion I had with my team. Right? In this code base, I have an internal argument. Do I need a comment? Yes, I do. Okay, let's put a comment in there. What does that comment say? Right? So you won't see to-dos, and I mean, you might find to-dos in this application. I don't know. I'll have a look afterwards. But yeah. It's super annoying because that code gets 5 story points in stand-up. You spend a week on it, and now you look like an ass in retro. So, I mean, so we've one of the things, if you join the Discord, we just had a massive conversation on story pointing. Jota took took the chance to kind of explain and share some links on people saying we don't need story points, and then myself, Apex, and George kind of jumped in with different views. So, okay, I'm almost at time anyway, so I'm gonna accept that. No, the biggest problem with Agile is that people equate Agile to ability to change things quickly, ability to just make things up and change them on the fly, right? And what they do is they develop tools. Jira, here's my biggest bugbear. They develop tools and they put tools on top, and they give you story points to work with so that you can represent up to upper management. Here's how long it'll take, but we don't use time, right? But at some point, someone equates time. And as a developer, you just want to develop. So one of the things I'm trying to focus on in this is communication, right? This diagram doesn't, I mean, I've really got to come up with some better diagrams. And in that conversation, if you choose to jump into the Discord, I do share a document that Apex has actually asked me to build, and I'm still working on it, is why am I doing this, right? Again, interpretation, experience, different approaches. It's like the team pizza thing, right? How big should a team be? T-shirt sizing is whatever. I have different opinions on who should be doing what and when they should be doing things. I believe that Jira and tooling like it, and what I'm working on, it is not a developer tool. It should never be a developer tool. The developers don't care about swim lanes. Developers don't care about developers don't really care about pointing. They care about getting the job done. And I think if you can get out of the way, you should get out of the way. So this tool is built very much at being a planning tool first, right? It's meant to be a tool to say, hey, here's the information coming in, tickets, planning items, etc. Pointing is not associated with this piece at this point. Story pointing is a team-based exercise that should just be the teams, right? And generalities go up the line. But from a developer's perspective, I don't want to write software that involves swim lanes for the developers. I want to say, hey, here's what you've got to do. Work on this and mark it off and done it and get out of the way. And communication happens within the system so that you don't have to be bothered with, where are you on that? What, this person needs to know this person needs to know this. That person cares, that person can subscribe. They can watch the history, they can do all those sorts of things. So I'm kind of working on that document, but it was quite a good discussion we had going on the whole the purpose of pointing and roles. When our PM is like, give me a t-shirt size on this, I'm like, depends on if you want it right or fast, that changes the t-shirt size. How mission critical is this? I want to list the tickets of priority and a generalized understanding of how much effort something takes me to do. No. Yeah, keep up. This is valid discussion, right? Retros. To have retrospectives, you have to have an honest team. You have to have conversation. You have to have a team that is willing to stay, I don't like this didn't work, right? But they're not. If your team is, if the team can't actually achieve a retro, the problem is, it's not necessarily safety as such, it's more, the team needs to feel comfortable. You need to build a team, right? And in reality, what happens is, you end up with developers pigeonholed into certain tasks because they're good at certain things. They don't end up working as a team. And I think practices like paired programming, you know, working with more experienced and less experienced developers, pairing them together, allowing some teaching to go on, allow the discussion of how the software should evolve, will speed up the team in time. And oftentimes we're just worried about the immediate throughput. I don't agree. T-shirt is much less granular. My current place is used to estimate size of a bigger project feature. That gives business a way to compare sizes and agree on priorities. Then we work on more precise estimations. Also important to compare only T-shirt size from single size, not between teams. That's true. Your team's T-shirt sizes are different than another, because maybe changing the color of a background is a small for one team. You're in for teams. Small could be a week of work. Here's a phrase that will probably trigger you then. The PM says, it's just. Right? So the argument I make is pointing. I'm a safety whiskey. An ad is about to start in a few minutes, so I do apologize if you get hit by an ad. But I'm almost at the end of the stream for today. We'll see if we can finish this up. If there's a conversation you want to continue, by the way, if there's thoughts and opinions you do have, please take them into Discord. This is the sort of stuff that I love talking about. It's obviously something I care about because I want to make this better, right? This is something that my perspective is my perspective of 25 years as a developer, you know, almost 20 years doing Agile. It's different experience. Oh, not almost 20 years, like 2009 I was first introduced to Agile stuff. So 15 years of that, right? Absolutely. Pointing is the domain of the team and the team only. A PO sat in a team is an interface to everybody above them, right? They should never be saying that's 5, that's 4 beyond the team, right? The team owns the story pointing. An individual team owns story pointing, and that is an estimation for the team to worry about. The PO should only ever relay, the team is currently estimating 30 to 40 points for this, or 30 points for this, or 40 points for this. T-shirt sizing or expert estimation is really what that is should be the realm of the team goes and discusses, says, hey, based upon initial outlook, you know, it feels like this, up it a size, right? Make it big enough, because the estimation requires the product management and the management team in general to be happy to adapt and flex and move. If they're not, and they're using that in any way, shape, or form as timelines, that's poor, right? You get more. The whole purpose is the further out you are, the less specific you are. The closer you are, the more accurate you can get, right? So t-shirt sizing, even that's a large, that's a small, etc. That doesn't really do very much. I would rather say, hey, that's an estimated 40 points of work based upon the team's current velocity. They'll achieve that in a sprint. They'll achieve that in 2 sprints, depending on your pointing scale, etc. But that's all that really should be relayed up. There should never be a, hey, why is that a 5? Not the concern of anybody outside of the team. I've been lucky enough in my current role to have a FU role. I have to go through the BS. I just get to solve problems. So anytime I have to step back into the swamp, I just hate it. It's necessary for the team, but at an individual level, it sucks. Is that you could use the story points in the same way you use the t-shirt sizes. This could help show the levels of uncertainty, effort, and risk. Yeah, so to say Agile's bad is wrong, and one of the key tenets, right? I might actually still, do I not have them? Oh no, because I lost all my tabs, didn't I? You look at the Agile Manifesto, right? Individuals and interactions of a processes and tools. Right? And that's kind of what I want to focus on, right? This matters more, right? Now, capturing the output of stuff matters. But again, as a developer, all you care about is that the requirements are valid, that the documentation of what you're expected to do and what is the expected outcome is valid. And I think greater time needs to be put into planning up front and introducing visibility so that the right people are asked the right questions at the right times. Right? If a project is behind schedule, the development team should not be the ones fighting the fight for why it's behind schedule. Right? The planning is the responsible part of that. Right? Why is it off pace? Let's look at the stories that created let's look at the planning items. So I've got to kind of get into my own terminology. I feel that this phase exists outside of our normal sprint, right? So again, Jira is kind of here, right? And all of this stuff gets put into these things, and they all sit in this awful backlog. So what I want to introduce is a review date. So in terms of priority, the planning items, the actual product management group sets the review date on all these things, right? If people disagree with the review dates, they can argue that up. They'll get told when it changes. They'll get told when it expires, etc. But the developers don't need to care about that. So this backlog is always based upon things that need to be done and when they need to be reviewed by, etc. Right? So the development team can look at it and say, "Hey, that story's not ready yet. We don't have these pieces. But the review date is next week." Then that can be pulled, and it can be, its review date can be pushed back, or things can happen to it. So. But I want those things to trigger automatically. I don't want developers to have to be involved in those pieces, right? Because they shouldn't be, right? Developers should be able to get on with the development and not worry about accountability to anybody else, other than the team. And I think again, coming back on the whole retrospectives are bad when your team can't be honest and when your team doesn't function as a team. Retrospectives are effective when the team can actually reflect and change and has the power to change things. When they're blocked by everything else, when they're blocked by, oh, we need new servers, well, then their management can go and ask for that. But if they're in an organization where that doesn't work, then that item's going to appear every time. So you need to identify those sorts of retros are very helpful, again, if you can reflect and you can make positive change. Kaizen, right? If you can affect change. If you can't affect change, retrospectives are just fuel on a fire. I've seen them from both perspectives. I have been in retrospectives that are good, and I've been in retrospectives that are kind of useless because no one wants to talk. I do recognize that story points are usually against stories, but in theory, if you have all your stories estimated, you'd have an aggregate of story points against the epic. Yeah. T-shirts have been used at a higher level before stories might even exist. T-shirt sizing is a gut feel. It should never be used to estimate time off of. It's not what it's aimed for. T-shirt sizing is that's large, that's small, that's medium, right? That's so. And again, you have to be in an organization that can adapt, because the organization has to understand that based upon the team, based upon the growth, based upon the experience, those numbers are going to change over time. That's the purpose, right? The purpose of not giving time estimates is because if you're working effectively with Agile, then you're using Scrum practices, then that pointing is based upon the effort involved, not the time. Because if I pick it up versus someone who's had a year's experience, our speeds are going, like if I drop someone new into this application, my 5 is not going to be someone else's 5, right? That's not the purpose. So, but the effort remains the same. No matter who does it, the effort remains the same. So that's why that 5. So if the team's going slowly, then the team should reflect and say, hey, how can we get this moving further forward? Because we had these 5s that do feel like they were 5s, but we're not moving fast enough. Well, hold on. Well, maybe we could pair A with B for a sprint or 2 and see if there's some challenges that we can get over there. So that's how your velocity improves, because then B gets happier because they know they have more confidence, and now their 5 points is a day faster than it was or whatever. So they all feed into communication, and they all feed into teamwork and working together. So I wouldn't burn Agile to the ground. I would shake up an organization and say, hey, if you want to do this, we do it right or we don't do it. Let's just go waterfall and burn everyone out, right? Maybe we do retros differently. Ours were always, hey, you pointed this at 10 and you missed the cutoff of closing that sprint. Why? And it was harder than we thought. Oh, we had a holiday in there. Blame. CYA culture is never good. Review, which is different than retro. Retro is which process of failing us. Retro is retrospective. It's reflection. It's what worked, what didn't. You know, what can we change? What can we improve? It's Kaizen again. Setting Kaizen, right? So you are setting your focus of improvement in the next time. I mean, in Agile projects for 13 years, and what annoys me until today is the fact that story points don't represent time, but in the end, you plan sprint based on the story points. As soon as you pair up, that 5 point story just turned into 10 because you just took 5 points. Not necessarily. A 5 point story didn't turn into 10 because if you're aligning points to resource, then right, that 5 point story is still a 5 point story because it's effort, right? It now might get done twice as fast because a more experienced programmer is working with a less experienced programmer, right? So that 5 point story now might take up a day less than it did last time. And now next time that 5 points is there, it might still take another day less. So you end up speeding things up. So again, the business has to be able to adapt. The business has to say, we are willing to take some slowness here and there for the benefit of the future good. And that's what often fails, right? And anytime we get into a position where developers are blamed for missing deadlines, it just creates a more and more tense environment. And a blame culture is very much the enemy of Agile, right? You need to embrace teamwork to use Agile effectively. Again, I think it's the alignment of time with points, etc. That's the challenge. There may be cost in time. I'm not debating there's a cost. There may be a cost in time. In reality, what happens though is that developer, I mean, unless I'm the only one in the world that does this, but I'm not always the most focused to people, right? Sometimes I'll sit watching Twitch streams while I'm working, right? And then I'll have a burst of energy and get the job done, right? But when you're working as a pair, you generally are more focused on the actual task in hand. So probably you're going to finish it a bit quicker than you would have done as a single. Well, we could start a whole different conversation on architects, right? But technically, my role is software architect, by the way. Yeah, but I don't necessarily believe in architects in the formal way, right? I believe that there are some concepts that need to be thought out. I believe that there are things that benefit from someone going ahead and setting some practices and plans. This is architecture, right? If I bring in a developer to work with me, then it's going to be implementing features in this framework, right? That architect should be heavily involved from a discussion perspective if there's new things to be done. How does it adapt? What do we change? What do we need? What is the cost? Because they understand those things. But I believe architects are developers, or architects should be available to developers all the time, but not necessarily always working in the code. I got into an argument with another streamer talking about what a team lead, manager, and scrum master should be doing, because I said a scrum master shouldn't exist, but turns out that scrum masters are glorified secretaries that help keep Jira up to date. Right, which is why I'm building what I'm building, by the way. I want to get out of the way of the developer. But anyway, I do not like doing this because this is actually a fascinating discussion that I do love having. I would really appreciate it again if you want to continue this conversation. You're more than welcome to come back. I would love it for you to come back and hang out again. I will finish by saying on the whole Scrum Master, Manager, Team Lead, etc. You're sounding sick. Might need a sick day. Sadly, my work knows I stream. So it would be easy to find. A Scrum Master is a ceremonial role, right? It is all I see a Scrum Master is doing is ordering a ceremony, right? Making sure that the right questions are asked and the team should run with it, right? Again, if a manager is put into that role, it's terrible because it puts a formality to it, and it should be an informal thing. Retrospectives should be team respect. Should be respected as a team exercise, not a managerial exercise. And I think oftentimes that's the problem, is that some of these things become, we must do this because the Agile says so. No. Where is it? Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And that's what I'm focusing on, right? This is one of my biggest tenets I'm focusing on. I want to introduce the process and tool for management to increase the individual's ability to interact. And that's kind of where I'm going. Working software over comprehensive documentation. We covered that before. Right. So there could be more Scrum based versus Agile specifically, but again, I think it's really great to see these different experiences, these different opinions. I would really appreciate, I've really enjoyed this, and I do apologize that I do have to put it to an end. To be frank, that is also how one of our Scrum Masters explained to me. He was clear that we should be able to work the same without him. He's only trying to be a person, not invested in the project, only into process. He was also doing a lot of reporting. His opinion was that it should be automated as much as possible. I actually rotated Scrum Master. My team had the duty every sprint, a different Scrum Master was up. So they had to take on the role. And really, again, it was just a ceremony, right? It was just more, hey, where are we? Where do we need to be, etc. And again, the Scrum Master is the person that, at the end of the day, the product lead, the product manager, product owner, however you term them, could go to and say, hey, where are we with this? But again, I want to get rid of that, right? This should be a fun, interactive exercise. Hey Jira, what are my open tickets? Okay, I will finish with vision. What I want to do, and you guys can share that information because I'm not going anywhere near Jira. But what I want to do is, again, swim lanes are a management concern. Swim lanes are not anything to do with the developer. So the developer view, even the manager, the planning item view of this is not even one of swim lanes. It's what do I need to do, right? What is my actual work? And in priority order, what is the work? So the dashboard for this kind of works alongside that, right? But it wouldn't even be a dashboard. It's a view. It's not, you don't need to see the swim lanes. Swim lanes are a management focus from a business perspective. I've seen, again, I was mentioning yesterday, streamers using, especially game devs, using Kanban boards to track, here's what I've got to do, here's where I am. But they're also filling that planning role. They're not filling just the developer role. So they're kind of crossing multiple lines. But I want to provide quick visibility into, here's what you need to do. And then again, notifications to people so that when it progresses to a new phase, you don't have to tell anybody. They'll get notified this product, this item has actually just gone to this phase, and anyone who cares can be told. So someone who entered something as a ticket, a support ticket originally, will know when that story hits production because they'll get told it's now been moved into this phase. That is the goal. I want to get this away from developers and purely into management. Keyboard Cowboy, thank you very much for the follow. But anyway, I'm running late. I do have a job to start. Fortunately, I have some Lambda functions to write today. More than welcome, Apex. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. If you want to continue any of this conversation, if you want to ask more questions, if you want to pass any more opinions, feel free to join the Discord. This is my last stream of the week. I may stream over the weekend depending on my time. But on Monday, I'm going to do a coding challenge. So that is aimed at helping people who are new to kind of the analysis part of software development, or kind of just want to see me struggle. Not disagreeing on that one. Sounds like we might have some fun conversations. So yeah, in the Discord there is a 3 options that you're more than welcome to vote on. On Monday, I'll pick the one that wins. I'll pick that up. I've not looked at the code. I've not looked at the requirements. I pick them up. I analyze. I work on them. I develop them. I knock them out in one stream. Done. So, and then I share the results for everyone to see. So that's kind of just a fun challenge. See how my brain works. See how I tackle design and how you might tackle it. So that'll be Monday's stream. But in the meantime, if I don't see you around, have a great weekend. Thank you very much for joining me. I should raid somebody. I do have enough people to raid out. If anyone has any suggestions, I'm more than open to them. I'm always happy to see new people. Although there's not a lot of dev streamers. Yeah. Because you're very welcome. Thank you very much for hanging out and contributing to the conversation. This is an amazing 40 minutes of chat. I didn't expect. There's nobody else. If no one has any suggestions, we're going to go over to Full Stack. Full Stack on Fridays does a Q&A. He's been a developer for 40 years. Right? He's been DevOps. He does a lot of cool Ruby stuff. So we're going to go over to Full Stack Live. When I can actually do a raid. Apparently I'm failing at being a streamer today. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for hanging out. Appreciate it. Look forward to more conversation in the future, and I will see you around. Take care, all.